guys, it's Jess and I'm back with another in the webinar series that I do through Inkwell. This one is going to be focusing on villains, who are one of my favorite character groups, as you know. But today we're actually going to be taking on some of the characteristics of what makes a villain a villain. I want to cover a few things. So if this seems a little bit scatterbrained, I apologize, but this is going by my notes from over a week ago. So let's see what we can do with this. Alright, so the villain category often has three sorts of subcategories within it. There are the geniuses, there are the mentally insane, whether they are clinically insane or whatnot, we'll go into that a little bit later, and then whether or not they're charismatic. So these sorts of things were things that we could all agree upon that most villains possess. They have some degree of insanity, they have some secret overarching plot that's going to destroy the world if it all goes right, or take it over, depending on what level of maniacal they happen to be. And they're all charismatic to a degree, whether it's upfront charisma or whether it's more intellectual charisma. There are certain categories within this fly. Alright, so it's fairly easy to identify whether your character is going to be charismatic or not. So just take into account whether or not you want your character to be good with people, whether you want them to be good with crowds as opposed to individuals. You know, these sorts of things will come into play. Whether or not, let's see, whether they're good at manipulating or whether they're simply good at talking, which sounds like it's part of the same thing, but it's really not. You can have an excellent speechman, but have somebody who has no idea how to manipulate a crowd or a person. So these are some things to just take into consideration as far as that's concerned. So on to another point that I wanted to bring up is genius. Is your villain a genius? The one that I'm working with for this exercise is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all villains have to be geniuses. As a matter of fact, some of the more charismatic villains may be as dumb as a pile of rocks. And that's okay too. You have to figure out where your comfort zone is for your villain, what their purpose in the story is, as opposed to the big bad guy. You know, because even within that, different types of villains do different types of things. So you have to make sure that you're taking into account all of those. And whether or not you actually need your main bad guy to be super smart, or maybe he has an accomplice or a science team or something of that nature that works for him, so he doesn't have to be. Maybe he's just the front man. It's entirely possible and entirely plausible as well, so that's something that you're going to want to take into consideration. So the thing that prompted all of this is actually the third category, which is insanity. I was watching a series online that went over some of the most evil men and women on the face of the earth. And it kind of all steered in the direction of insanity without actually touching upon it. That fly is going to drive me nuts. So I want you to take a moment, take your main villain from your work in progress, if you have a work in progress. If not, I want you to take a villain that you are very familiar with, or one that perhaps you're still fleshing out, and this will help you a little bit. I just need you to take a villain. You got one? Good. Alright, so we're ready to get going. I need to know, 1, is your villain charismatic? Yes or no? Please write it down. Okay. Number 2, is your character a genius? Okay. Number 3, is your character insane? Now don't overthink this one too much, just write yes or no. Okay? Okay, so what are the negative aspects to his personality? Like for Eric, who is the villain that I'm working with presently, I said that being brilliant has its downsides. He tends to be a little bit of an asshole. He's very blunt, and he tends to fit the charismatic stereotype for a villain a little bit too easily. And does this make him sane or insane, this negative side? Just take a moment and think about that. Alright. What's the reason that they have for being insane or staying sane, depending on which side you put? Now for me, I said that he wasn't insane. Annie is his 11-year-old daughter, and she's adopted. She is the reason that he's not insane, because he seems to be holding all of the strings together, whether she realizes it or not. Now this is going to seem a little weird, but after looking at some of these things, is your character sane or is your character insane? Some of your answers may change, and that's great, because that means that you're thinking about it. If they don't, then they don't, and that's great too, because really all of this is character exploration, which is something that we all have to go through, and something that we all really need to dig a little bit deeper into. Because sometimes our villains, who aren't the heroes, so they're not going to get all of the limelight, don't get looked into on a deeper level. So you're going to want to take a look at that. So let's go over a couple things. So as far as the insanity is concerned, now I've asked you twice, do they suffer from any clinical sorts of insanity, like depression, schizophrenia, psychosis, and why? So take a couple minutes and figure that out. No, go ahead, I got time. Right. So the reason I'm asking clinically speaking is because this could be leading into something bigger. And it could be a cause for some of the reason as to why they act the way that they do. Someone who's depressed, you know, would have a different sort of reaction to certain things than somebody who's suffering from schizophrenia. So you're gonna want to take a lot of these things into consideration when you're working with your villain. If they're not insane, then they're not insane, and that's great, because that would be perpetuating a stereotype, which is, and you know what? Here's the thing. Stereotypes are stereotypes because they work. So whether you feel like you're perpetuating a stereotype or not, it doesn't really matter. As long as it works within your story and you're not going cliche, because that is something entirely different. Alright. So stereotypical, maybe okay, cliche, bad. So keep that in mind. So from there, we actually went on to what defines a hero versus what defines a villain. Now the funny part about all of this is we came up with a list of a few things as far as the heroes were concerned. Makes a hero. Selflessness, some maybe martyrdom, that charming white smile, white knight stereotype, almost the paladin for those of you who play D&D. You know, the white knight with a cause, the sort of arrogant but has the skills to back up that arrogance kind of demeanor. Which I thought was funny that they mentioned arrogance for the hero, because a lot of times people don't think of that sort of thing. But it's very true. A lot of heroes are arrogant, and they need that sort of arrogance and confidence behind them in order to do what they need to do. Because even if they don't die, and thus not becoming martyrs for the cause, often face life or death situations. And that sort of confidence will carry them through a lot of the time. So it is important that they have that, but it does come off as arrogance sometimes. So you just have to keep a fine line on, actually a good handle on where the line is as far as that's concerned. So then we move to the villains. And it's kind of funny because they mention arrogance, again, murder, and from there we actually refined it to intent to harm and torture. So what it comes down to, as far as what means to be a villain, is intention. Which, if you think about it, the intention's really all that separates either one of them. Because, to be fair, villains could see their acts as heroic. They don't always have to be these evil people. Sometimes they're just people that are doing what they need to do. It's something to ponder while you're going over your heroes and villains. And one of the things that we said, that from a hero to a villain, they need to give up some of their humanity in the process, which I thought was kind of interesting. But it's true. The intent to harm and things like that do force you to give up a little bit of your humanity in order to kind of transcend. But at the same time, when coming from a villain to a hero, the villain simply has to change his intent. So, with that being said, I want you to go ahead and take a look at your villains. Maybe make a spreadsheet of, or if you don't want to do that, cluster. I do love clustering, and I'll link a blog post by my friend Kit on how to cluster at the bottom of my blog. And just go over your villains. Go over your heroes too. I want you to see where the lines are. Take a really good critical look at your characters. Do they fall into the hero category, or do they fall into the villain category? And if they do fall into one of these two and not the huge gray area between, see what they feel like. See if they're okay with where they stand. And I know that that may sound a little bit odd, but really, see. Are they okay being considered villains? Would they want to change that? Would they want to be considered villains and their heroes? You never know. The dark side is appealing. They do have cookies. So, for now, I just want you to take a look at your villains, at your heroes, and get all of that writing exercise out of the way. And remember, NaNoWriMo is just around the corner, so if you have your WIP for Nano in mind, perhaps start doing some planning for that. In any case, this is Jessie, and I am signing off for the night, and I hope you have a wonderful day and great writing, all. Bye!